All right, today we've got Cody Baker with Baker Capital Partners, who's a loan broker, and want to get into kind of what he's doing, how he can help, and also educate myself and everyone listening on different types of loan products out there. So, Cody, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, man. So, Baker Capital Partners, I know you're with a different group before, but you just started this, but you've been lending for quite a while, right?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years of drinking out of a fire hose.
I'm sure. So I don't want to say where do we start, but where do we start? Let's pretend you don't know much about lending. You're a newbie. What would you recommend for, let's look at a deal like 500,000 and then anything over $1 million.
Where to go for like the loan product?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, first time buyers are probably going to start with SBA. I think that's probably the better place to go. I think first time buyers are probably better off buying a deal themselves rather than raising money. And, you know, keep as much equity in the first deal, second deal as you can. Go into an SBA product. SBA through self-storage is the lowest barrier to entry into commercial real estate and as a whole. Now I learned that very early on, and that's when I learned that, I was like, all right, I'm getting into self-storage. And because of I think I don't remember what year. I want to say it was like 2019, maybe it was like 2000. Actually, it was like 2009, where SBA started allowing self-storage to classify under the SBA, the Small Business Administration. It was as of somewhat recent. I mean, that was in the last 15 years. And it was because like all the mom and pops, like the managers of the facility lived above the office. They owned the property. They lived above the office. They would go downstairs to start working. So they consider that owner user, which is what SBA is designated for. So they started allowing SBA loans on self-storage, and there's no minimum qualifications from a borrower standpoint, like net worth, your typical net worth and liquidity requirements. Sure, you need the down payment and enough to operate the facility, but if you have W-2 income, you can leverage on that. You can, it makes it a lot easier to get into the deal when you don't have these minimum like net worth requirements to get into the deal. So
I've done SBA loans. So you're saying for newbies, I don't say newbies, but you know, getting in the game, you're saying because what reasons you suggest?
It's high leverage. It's the lowest down payment. You can leverage your personal cash flow. That could, I just did a consultation last week with a person that's first time buyer in self storage, looking to go into SBA. When you analyzed that deal, it was about $500,000. When you analyzed that deal, it didn't cash flow at 90% leverage, only 10% down. That's great and all, but they're going to be stuck in that loan for like at least 4, 5, 6, 7 years until they've paid down the note enough, until the value has risen enough to where now the leverage is lower. The only way really out earlier than that, you can't really refinance. The only way out earlier than that would be to sell it, which is a possibility, but you're probably floating some of the bills. Possibly, it depends on how long it takes you to, increase that margin of profitability.
Yep. And SBA has prepayment penalties as well, right?
For 3 years. Yeah. So that's typical. Every bank's kind of regulated, has their own like policies and stuff, even though they're under the government SBA program. So some banks might have like a 5-4-3-2-1. They might be doing like a 10-year fixed on a 7A program, which is interesting because 7A is usually floating. But kind of getting off topic. But I think beginners, your first idea is to try to keep as much equity and put as less down as possible. That's what everybody's trying to do.
And I love that. And I did that for my first 2 deals. I actually did an SBA. I've done 4 of them actually. The last one I did was a year ago, but it was for I already had 3 sites in that town and was buying
Mhm.
2 more, and it was considered an expansion. So technically, I brought 0% down because it
Yeah.
was considered an expansion. Like,
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer. My interest rate's higher. Speaking of that, what are interest rates right now for SBA?
All over the place.
Yeah.
Again, every bank has their own policies and stuff. So one bank might be prime plus 50, I think, is kind of the cheaper end of like the 7A type program. And all the way up to like prime plus, 275.
Yeah.
And
let's back up a little bit. I don't want to cut you off, but let's back up a little bit. You're a broker, so you can go to multiple, but you shop multiple banks. You find the best deals and the best products that fit someone's deal, correct?
Yep. Yeah, we shop all over the place. So let's back up a little bit. So, SB is a great option for first timers, but you got to know that all these other different types of products out there exist. Like, whenever I go shop a bank or shop a deal, looking for the best terms that I can possibly find, regardless of if we're targeting SBA or not. I mean, you've got local, national, regional banks, local, national, regional credit unions. All of those are a little bit different in their own respects. You've got debt funds. You've got CMBS lenders. You've got construction-specific lenders, private money, hedge funds, family offices. I think I already said debt funds. There's multiple tiers of debt funds, and what they typically like to lend on. There's all different kinds of products out there, and each of those products, each of those lenders have different product lines that work off of different indexes. And so prime is an index. Right now it's at 8%. The treasuries are an index, the 3-year, the 5-year, the 7-year, the 10-year. Those are all indexes, and they're all going to have a spread on top of that, which is their profitability, right? Same thing on the prime side banks, where they have prime plus a half. That's 8% plus half a percent. That's 8.5%. Whereas a treasuries plus 300 right now, treasuries at forward, just call it 4%, plus 300 basis points, which is 3%, it's 7% rate as opposed to 8.5. So you might be able to go talk to one bank on one corner and go right across the street and get a 1.5 cheaper.
Yep.
It just depends on what kind of index they're lending off of.
Yep.
So first, going back to that question, the first time buyers. I mean, if you have the net worth, I mean, maybe you're just a first time buyer in self-storage, but you just sold the company and made a good amount of money. And now you're looking to do something with your time and with your money. SBA is probably not the best product. Let's go put a little bit more down. Let's get a cheaper interest rate. Let's get a little bit easier of an execution, get into that deal. Be in a better position to refi or sell whenever you want to. So there's all different kinds of products out there. That's what my job is. I shop the market. I find the best terms. And part of my job, a big part of my job, is making sure that the deal closes. There's a lot of loan brokers out there that kind of just, hey, John, here's ABC Bank. Good luck.
Yep.
Here's my invoice to pay me at closing for the introduction to that lender. Those people do exist out there. And some clients, that's the better fit. They like to have that control, have it hands-on, and they're probably charging a lot less of a fee, I would think, maybe just to make that introduction. I don't operate that way. It's not how I was taught. That's not how I've retained clients for years on end. So I make sure that the deal closes. I handle everything throughout the closing process, all the third parties, title, legal, insurance, all the negotiations between the lender and the borrower, any problems that pop up with the third parties. If we have a problem with the appraisal, a problem with the environmental, there's ways to solve all those problems. And that's what hiring somebody like me would do. It would be make sure that the deal closes regardless of what problems pop up. Because I've probably solved more problems in the last year just on various deals that like more problems than what your average beginner is probably going to experience in their career of self-storage. So there's a problem on every deal, and we're doing 20 to 30 deals a year.
Yeah, for sure. I want to get into a bunch of that stuff there. And well, I think a lot of listeners do listen to or do have self-storage or want to get in self-storage. We definitely have listeners from all realms of investing and entrepreneurship. So not necessarily storage specific, but I want to ask how much, obviously in the news, you hear about Feds dropping rates and maybe another 2 more cuts this year. How much does that affect any of the loans that you're dealing with?
The first cut that happened, that was a big question that I got. Like, what are my interest rates now that we got a 50 basis point cut? At the time of that first cut, most of the market was already priced in. The treasuries, they were already priced in. The lenders that went off of treasuries, they were still, if they had a 300 spread as their profitability on top of the index, the treasury index, then they still had the 300 spread after that 50 basis point cut. 50 basis point cut was on prime. If they were lending off of treasuries, the treasuries didn't really move that much after that cut. They went down a little bit because people got faith in the market. They started buying up treasury bonds.
Yep.
So yes, the cost of the treasuries went down a little bit, which helped. But the lenders didn't change their spread. The where it made the difference was the banks that go off of prime. Your community banks, your local banks, and SBA. Yep. So I think it affected the first time buyer, I think, more than anybody. Unless you're trying to go out there and get a conventional loan and trying to get the most competitive rate you possibly can, it's probably like a 200 to 200 spread over the treasuries, which was, at the time when we got that 50 basis point cut, those rates were like 575 to 625, whereas 50 basis point cut on prime was still 8%. So I was still beating that rate by almost 2%. Yep. On deals that I was closing with credit unions and banks that go off of the treasuries. So yep. I didn't really feel it. I didn't really feel it all that much. I think it helped with some underwriting. What I think it did was I think that it and I've been saying this for years, that whenever they increased prime by 5.5%, we had this massive gap in the market between where buyers and sellers wanted to be on purchase price, right? Because the interest rate affects purchase price. And there was that big gap. I mean, from the cheapest interest rate you could get in a primary market off the treasuries, et cetera, it was, call it 6%. Whereas at the time when prime was at 8.5 and these banks are doing prime plus a half, that was 9%. That's a 3-point spread between where, the seller is hoping that you can get an interest rate in the 6s. Whereas if you're in a tertiary market, a class C property, not paved roads, not fenced, it hasn't had any improvements to the roof and structure since the 80s. You're probably not getting that 6% rate. And so there was a big gap between those things, between those numbers of what the seller wanted, what the buyer wanted. I think with this decrease and what's happening with these prime decreases, it is closing that gap between where the real interest rate average is. There's now only like a 1-point gap. With prime coming down and treasuries kind of taking back up, we're just closing that gap, which is allowing transactions to happen again. So you've seen a pickup in transaction volume this year, which has been fantastic. Yeah. People wanting to move, sellers getting motivated to move, buyers getting motivated to move. So with the Fed making moves, it is doing a lot for transaction volume. I don't think it necessarily impacted a whole ton of like interest rates per se, because a lot of clients that I work with own 10, 15, 20, 30 properties plus. We're trying to go after those treasury rates, which are way cheaper. So, yep. But that's what I think it did do. Is I think it helped transaction volume.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because they talk about how cutting Fed rates will help. I think a lot of investors have been sitting on the sideline waiting for that. But as you alluded, that the more seasoned investors, if you've been in it for a while, yet those rates aren't affecting you. You're looking more at the treasuries and products based off that. So let's get into that and kind of closing up SBA. SBA caps at $5 million. Is that right?
SBA caps at $5 million. Okay. But whenever we just did a deal that was $12 million, took it through SBA, the government picks up $5 million of that. The bank picks up the other, whatever it was.
Right. Yep.
So you can still go above $5 million. You're just going to be broken up a little bit, which is actually advantageous because then you get the federal funds rate from the CDC plus the bank rate and averages out a lot less than prime. Because I think the SBA rate right now is like 570 something, 577.
Okay.
I believe it's actually pretty cheap.
Yeah, no, that is cheap. So let's kind of get in the next tier. I don't know how many tiers you want to try to do, but
it's up to you, man. We can take this as deep as you want to.
What's for a more seasoned investor? And that's obviously subjective, but more seasoned investor, what's your top 3 loan products? What do those look like?
Right now, probably credit union debt, life code debt, and CMBS.
Okay. And what's the difference between those?
Credit unions right now are, and for this has been for like probably the last 6 months, have typically been beating your typical banks on interest rate. They have a little bit cheaper spreads. I'm seeing like, 240, 260, 280 spreads on the treasuries. Whereas, yeah. And specifically the credit unions that are pricing deals off of treasuries. Banks are just 25 to 30 basis points wider is kind of what I've seen. Yeah, like everything in this game is like said with a grain of salt, because can I be proven wrong that there's a bank out there that can beat 6.5%? Sure. Yep. My most competitive bank does, 200 spreads over the treasuries. And, that was, we got a deal done at 5.79% or something like that. I think it was 5.79 just 2 months ago, back in September when the treasuries were low. Yep. So, the credit unions are a little more lenient on amortization. I was able to get 25 and 30 years, whereas the banks were stuck at 20 and 25. So that was the benefit of credit unions. I think life cos, when the loan amounts are a little bit bigger, north of 5 million, north of 10 million loan amounts, you can start solving to pro forma numbers and get a conventional loan off of day one. Yep. Which is interesting. So you start solving to like year 2 and year 3 numbers, and they give you leverage based on that, but a conventional loan priced on the treasury. So it's, they're probably averaging 220, 240, 260. It's life company. So it's a little bit more competitive. Loan amounts are a little bit bigger, profitability is a little bit bigger, so they can get a little more competitive on rate. CMBS, full-term interest only. It's hard to beat right now when they're pricing about the same as banks and they're going full-term interest only, whereas the banks or the credit unions aren't going to give that interest only period. Yeah. You might get some with the banks, some with the credit unions, but if you really want to maximize cash flow, CMBS is the way to go. They're 240 call it 250 to 300 spreads on the treasuries, which is right now 6.5% to 7%. Interest only, which is hard to beat. So we're doing some retail deals right now under CMBS. Client of mine just assumed a CMBS loan. All CMBS loans are assumable on another project. I'll probably close the most of this year, probably under credit union debt. And the others have been banks, just because of the credit unions have a lot more, I think, red tape when it comes to policy, a lot more hard lines in the sand. So if we need to get creative, we might have to take that 25, 30 basis point hit and get a little more creative with the bank debt. So it just depends on the deal.
Sure.
Depends on the size of it, depends on location, a lot of things. But those are my top 3 right now. That was a long-winded answer, but.
No, that's good. That's great stuff. All those 25% down, 25-year, 20-year AM?
Depends on cash flows. But I would say my average is probably 35. A lot of banks, a lot of firms that want to kind of stick in those 60s. Whenever we had that increase in rates, and then you had like an average of like 20 to 30% hit on values, which meant all those loans increased leverage by potentially 20 to 30%. If they were already leveraged up to 70% and they went up by 20%, that loan's leveraged at 90% now, and that bank is in trouble. So I think they're just more conservative from that perspective. It's Depends on if that bank specifically or that firm specifically likes that asset class. Like, I went and talked to one life co about the retail deal, and he was like, "We are not aggressive on retail right now because a lot of our portfolio under retail got boosted up in leverage."
Yeah.
So they were like maxing at 60%. So it made more sense to go CMBS on that deal.
Gotcha.
So it's a tough market. I think it's getting easier, but it still takes a shopping process. Still kind of takes knowing what you're targeting, what the goals are for the investors and the GP and the LP, et cetera, and finding the right product that fits the whole thing.
Sure. And how much does experience and reputation and just relationship matter with those? Because I know I've done 25% down, and knock on wood, shouldn't have a problem going back to the same well with that. So how much does that factor into?
It's as big as it always has been. I think they're leaning on they're all the banks and all the firms are leaning heavily on sponsor liquidity, just in case you have a problem.
Yep.
You know how to solve it, and do you have the liquidity to be able to do that? There's been a lot of blood in the water this year, for lack of better terms, on syndications with bigger properties. And so if you're going to be raising a bunch of money and only putting in 5 or 10% of the equity into the deal, your reputation's got to be able to speak to that you know what you're doing. Not only are you taking along 10, 15, 20, 30 people along with the ride, with that investment, you're doing it in a little bit of a down market. We're recovering, but you got to know what you're doing. So I think the reputation piece is big. I think highlighting what you've done in the past is big, whether you've done another commercial property or not. Maybe you led a business and a team of 50 people and you took it full cycle and sold it. That is something to lean on, So highlighting your experience and your past, and so even if you're a first time buyer, talking about stuff that you did is big. So experience is big. I think liquidity is big. And just making sure you're staying conservative from an operational standpoint, accounting for all potential expenses that you might run into. If you're undercounting, this is one thing we ran into with the CMBS deal, the Grapevine deal, those sponsors were undercounting for TILCs, which is tenant improvements and leasing commissions. And that lender questioned the sponsors' experience and their viability to buy this deal just because they didn't account for that. They're like, enough. So
interesting. So how important is it to have like a full business plan on the deal for a newer investor compared to a more seasoned investor?
I think your new investor, you got to dot every T and cross every I, right? I think the more seasoned investor, where you've got 20 deals under your belt and you're managing 15 currently and 5 of them went full cycle, your history and your profile and resume will kind of speak for itself.
Yep.
From that perspective. And you don't really need to put together like an entire business. Most of the guys that are doing that are up there with that type of ownership and assets under management, they have a templated business plan that they just plug and play. They get it done, and they'll still have the full business plan.
Yep.
So I think it's outrageously important. That business plan is outlining not only the experience, but how you're going to operate, how you're going to market the property, how you're going to stabilize the property, how you're going to continue to rate manage. If you're going to hire a manager, it's got to detail all that kind of stuff. I think that it just it puts you in the best position to be respected as someone that's reaching out to that lender. And listen, the lender know that you're serious, as opposed to the other 20 or 30 deals that he's got on his desk.
Yep. Well, and I know most banks, and banks I've dealt with, like local banks, they may ask for a business plan, but they don't really give you much information. So you kind of have to tread water by yourself and figure it out. It sounds like you're kind of a solution provider. So do you help with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I won't let a deal go out to market until it's ready.
Yep.
To be presented that way. There's a lot of times I get get a deal from a client, they're first or second time buyer or what have you, and they hand me the feasibility study, and that's their business plan. It's a feasibility study. I'm like, nope, go back.
Yeah.
You need all your own files, all your own stuff. We're not presenting somebody else's work. So part of my job is making sure that we're teed up for success, because my fee is dependent upon a successful closing.
Right.
And I want that timeline to be as short as possible. So if we got to be doing a bunch of front end work to make sure it's ready to go, so that we achieve the possible term, the ask on the terms, and achieve it in a short enough amount of time so that we can start the close process, get the deal closed on time. Sometimes it's really short order where I'm like, yo, you've got 48 hours to put all this together.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help you. Here's some pointers, but it's got to be your work. And I'll tidy it up, because I'm going to repackage the whole thing and put it in my presentation. But it's just always best to kind of have that business plan ready to go.
Yeah. No, that's good information.
Yeah.
So we've kind of covered, I guess, 2 tiers of loan products. Are there any others that you kind of touch for bigger deals, 20 million plus, 50 million plus? Is there something different, or are you still kind of hitting those credit unions, Lifeco and CMBS?
So credit unions kind of max out on loan amounts at about like $4 to $6 million bucks. Okay. Then they'll start participating with other credit unions. Now you've got multiple approval processes and stuff. So anything really over like 6, 7, 8 million, I don't go to a credit union for, unless I know. Unless when I talk to them, I'm like, yes, I can execute this deal. I can do this $8 million deal on my balance sheet. I don't have to participate it out. If the credit union tells me that, I'm impressed. Usually they're participating out anything over like $4 to $6 million bucks. So bigger deals, portfolios where you're pushing, 20, 30, 40 million bucks in loan size. Right now those are kind of difficult to get done, especially in the storage space. Deals really aren't that big. I've only got one that's like that I'm working on now, where the as completed value is like $42 million. It's a 1,000 unit facility. It's a beast. There just aren't many of those out there that exist, but you're going to your Lifecos, you're going to CMBS, you're going to debt funds probably. And the more creative side of the debt fund era is going to be like, my example would be, a debt fund that's backed by Lifeco money. They're executing on their own balance sheet, but they're backed by Lifeco money, so they can kind of mimic Lifeco terms, maybe with like a step down prepay as opposed to yield maintenance.
Gotcha.
They can get a little more creative in some of the other aspects because they're controlling the funds, but their funds are backed by Lifeco money, so they're able to do that competitive kind of structure. And there's multiple scenarios like that out there, multiple types of debt funds that operate different ways and get their funds in different ways, and more discretionary versus federal. So that's where I'd probably be getting these bigger deals done. That's where I'm getting this one. We're going to refinance this deal as soon as they get the certificate of occupancy after construction. Take them into probably a bridge style product that leads into Lifeco. I think is probably going to be the best combo for that one.
Got it. Makes sense. Cool. It's good information. So you as a problem solver, I had an issue actually. We'll just use my example to see how you could help with this. Cause a year ago, I probably could have used you. I was using the SBA loan. It was an expansion, so it's supposed to be 0% down. The appraiser that the bank that I used, I knew from the get-go. They asked me 2 questions, and one of the questions from the appraiser was, and this is self-storage, is do you have any? No, what was it? It wasn't do you have any year leases, but it was like, can you send all your year leases over? Something like that. Something about year leases and self-storage. I'm like, who is this appraiser? They know nothing about storage. And I kind of busted their balls, which was mistake number 1. I shouldn't do that to an appraiser, but they came back with a bad appraisal. So how would you handle that?
The first thing is asking them how many. I would just you can challenge their authority and expertise without challenging their authority and expertise, without challenging their person, without challenging the person. You can challenge the company without challenging the person, I guess is probably the better way to do it. When you're solving these problems, these third-party problems with the bank. If the bank retrades you at the 11th hour, if from the committee review and approval and it gets changed, if a phase one person doesn't like a certain section of the property or whatever. The thing to know is you're still dealing with humans, right? You're not dealing with a computer. You're dealing with humans, and so there's a level of human psychology here where you can lean on. And so that's what I was saying. You can challenge the company without challenging the person. And I think probably the better way to go on that one would have been asking how many storage properties that company has done in the last 6 months.
Right.
Has appraised in the last 6 months. And I think you kind of poke around at those kind of questions, see what their expertise is. And then
do you do that before you pick the appraiser, or?
So that's what I said is usually the bank is giving you an option of like option one doesn't even tell you the company name.
Yep.
They don't want any bias to picking a valuation person, right? So they're just going to give you option one is $2,400. They can get it done in 3 weeks. Option two is, et cetera.
Which is crazy to me. And I don't mean to cut you off, but that's crazy to me that as the person buying, the investor that's buying the property has no say. And I've dealt with banks where you do have a say, but you should have a say in what appraiser you're using, and you should have a bias, because I don't want to use Joe Schmo who does single family rentals and is like, yeah, you know what? I'm not very busy. Give me some commercial deals. No, so you know nothing about commercial cap rates. You know nothing.
So one thing I always ask the bank to do whenever they're going out for bids and I can't see the company name is give me their experience in self-storage. How many self-storage properties have they appraised in the last 6 months? Put that as a line item of a question that they need to answer when they submit their bid. So that's one mitigating factor. But the reason why they have so many regulations around this is like, how does the government make their tax revenue? Off of values, right? Commercial real estate's probably a lot. I mean, it's up there with residential. A lot of banks make all their money off of commercial. A good portion of our government's tax revenue is off of commercial real estate. So there's got to be regulations in place that some kind of checks and balances, So that's the main reason why that I know of. It's why there's all these regulations, but you can kind of game it sometimes.
Right.
Whereas maybe the loan officer is like, so we actually did this for car washes. 'Cause car washes come back with like a value that can't be lent on. It's I forget the name. Business intangible value.
Yep.
Is what they call it. And so you get like a real estate value, you get an equipment value, and then a business intangible value.
Which is basically the customers, the business name, all that stuff, right?
Bingo. Stuff you can't securitize, right? So what we would do is like we would know. I would request that piece of like what's their experience of appraising car washes, and I already knew that one of the national carriers has done over 500, 700 car washes in the last 12 months. And so as soon as I saw that note, I was able to kind of know who that company was. And I was like, okay, we want to go with option 3. So there's ways to game it. The loan officers are not supposed to give you the insight of who it is. Maybe the loan officer is a friend of yours and you're able to game it a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's still got to be a level of confidentiality to it, from the committee's perspective because of the bank policies. And those policies are regulated by the government. Can be, So, that's But solving problems like that is part of the process. Like your appraisal that came back not favorable, I'd have sent it back. So this is not acceptable. Here's why. This reason. If these guys can't get it right, we're going to pay for a new appraisal.
Yep.
And because of that, it means so much in the execution of your deal.
Yep.
So I've completely scrapped appraisals in the past. I've told that appraiser I'm not paying them.
Yeah.
My client is not paying them because this was not a good job done. for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. And there's some scenarios where I've pushed back on an appraiser so much that he was like, I'm charging you anyway, charging the client anyway. And yeah, you're going to have to go get another report. And so I've like taken that cost out of my fee for the client. And I was like, we got to get a new report. This was trash.
That's good.
Yeah. So
no, you're
I'm an advocate for the deal. You know,
what's that?
I'm an advocate for the deal.
Yeah. Yep.
I want it to be successful. I want the clients to be happy. I want repeat business. It's what I operate my entire business on, is repeat business and referrals.
Yep.
So I do what it takes to make sure that we're getting it done.
Yep. Well, and you're underwriting these deals before you're taking them to the market, correct?
100%. So there's any question that the appraiser is going to ask, I can rattle off and answer pretty quick. If he says, this is what I'm seeing, I'm like, no, that's wrong. This is why. Here's the market reports. So they don't really have access to like Tract IQ and Radius Plus, and they're not digging on those sites for data. They're going in a different way for data, which is a great source of data, which is all their past appraisals and the data they have internally in their appraisal shop. Which is a lot of great data, but sometimes you can push back against it and put it in your favor.
Yep. Cool. What have I missed? What else?
Man, I'm just excited to watch the market tick back up again.
Yeah.
I think November, right? We have another Fed meeting coming.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get 25 basis points. Hopefully we get 25 basis points off. And transaction volume just continues to go, because that's what we all need. We need sellers that are willing to move. We need purchase prices that allow us to get it financed. We need transaction volume to pick back up, and I think that's where we're headed. I think it's 9 months behind schedule, in my opinion. But
how much needed refis are you seeing where people bought 2 to 5 years ago, low rates, and now their notes are coming due or have come due, and they need the refi. If they can't refi, they got to sell. So how many of those are you seeing?
So I actually have a couple clients that have me on retainer, and I keep an eye on their entire portfolio. I analyze it on a monthly or quarterly basis, kind of depending, which means I'm doing an updated underwriting. I'm checking the market, seeing if we're leaving any money on the table, when it's going to be ready to refinance.
That's interesting.
A lot of times those clients send me that deal and I'm like, look, it's not ready yet. Here's why. Here's where it needs to be in order to be ready. Right now you're tracking for this, which means we need to probably boost up our rental rates a little bit quicker than what we're doing now. Probably need to boost up our marketing budget. Otherwise, when this note comes due, we're probably going to have to cash in refi. But if you can be here in NOI, then I can get this done under these programs. And it kind of gives us a business plan over the next 6, 9, 12 months to get that property ready to go for that.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of business planning, and working with property managers on, let's implement it this way. Because I probably should have backed up on why I'm able to talk about these things from a management perspective, even though I do finance. My wife and I own a small facility that we self-manage about an hour from our house.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've invested with another client of mine in over 650,000 square feet of storage. Some we self-manage with our own management company, and the others we have like CubeSmart and Extra Space Managing, because they're a little bit bigger, and they're in Michigan, we're in Texas. I get to see all these different types of strategies and how to do things. And so that's when, when these clients that have me under retainer, they want me to analyze their portfolio, I'm able to come back and say, hey, look, this is what I see working in other places, in other states with their clients, from a rate management perspective, marketing perspective. I'm able to kind of give a guideline on here's how we get to the place where we can refinance and make this deal okay.
Yeah.
There's one of my clients has like 2 of his deals. One needs He'll probably need like 300 or 400 grand and a cash in refi if he doesn't implement the business plan that we gave him. The other one's almost $1 million by the time that note comes due. And so I'm working heavily with his property manager on making sure that on a monthly basis that we're making progress towards that goal. And if we're short anywhere, I'm able to see that in the underwriting and say we need to boost it here, or doing a good job over here, or whatever. But I still lean on those managers' expertise, because a lot of those managers have been doing this for 20 years.
Yep.
I'm just giving them the financial strategy to make sure that the GPs and the owners of the property can do what they need to do from a refinance or, sell the property or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. I'm seeing and hearing a lot more investors in those situations, and it's mostly, not to pick on, but mostly syndicators. It's just, they're kind of highly leveraged, and they went for IO when it was cheap, and now they're in trouble. And they didn't, like you said, they didn't execute the plan, or maybe they didn't have a plan.
Well, a lot of times especially in the last 24 months, you had the plan, you were tracking for that, and the market kind of prevented you from doing that.
Yeah.
There's in some scenarios, like my client I was just talking about, that was out of his hands. The market switched on him.
Yep. And that's going to happen. Yeah, you're still executing your plan, but the market switched.
Still executing the plan. Now the plan just needs to get a little more aggressive.
Yep.
Make sure that you know what I mean, because both of those deals that I was just talking about, both of them are in bridge loans, and so those are only like 2-year notes. Yep. So that maturity is coming up, and we got to hit these metrics.
Yep.
So,
well, this is a great reason to have a plan, and your plan can't just be, well, because of inflation, and we're going to continue, values are just going to continue to go up. That is not a plan. And I see that a lot. And there's a lot of big name guru investors that are doing that. Just trusting their team to do that. No, that you can't do that.
Yeah.
I was going to, so keeping you on retainer is interesting. So how does that look? What does the portfolio need to look like to keep you on retainer?
Usually it needs to be big enough to where you can identify how much debt you're typically going to execute on within a 12-month period to make my retainer make sense.
Okay.
Because then I decrease the fees that we do per deal.
Yep.
It works better for developers that have
that makes sense.
Pipelines of land that they already own, they're going to develop. So it's a more solidified pipeline rather than kind of your syndicator that's just out there looking at every deal that hits the market, underwriting, not sure what's going to hit and what's not,
Yeah.
So it works better that way. But it's anywhere from, $2,500 to $10,000, depending on how big, monthly, depending on how big the portfolio is and how much I need to analyze on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Some clients that are at, $10,000 a month are, I'm looking at 2 deals a week in their portfolio, and they're sending me updated financials, and they need this underwritten and updated with a business plan. That's kind of the first year we're going to knock out the entire portfolio and make sure that we understand where all the loan products are, if we're leaving any money on the table, or if there's a business plan that needs to be implemented. That's typically the better scenario.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. It's just so that you can use. You kind of, in that scenario, you're adding me to the team without having to hire somebody like me that, it's probably $200,000 or $300,000 a year. Hire somebody with this expertise that can bring these relationships. The other side of my business is that I spend a ton of time with lenders, building those relationships. Again, it's people, right? So I'm just building relationships with people, and the human psychology aspect of, I'm your advocate for the bank, but I'm also the advocate for the client. How can we make this a win-win-win? So that's a big part of it as well. So even on newer investors that have 2, 3, 4 properties in the portfolio, and they've got the right pieces of the puzzle to be able to buy 5 or 10 deals a year, maybe 3, 4, 5 deals a year, even. It would still make sense to put me as somebody on the team, because then I can be included in the deck as part of the advisor on the team, which can help make them kind of look better in the eyes of a lender from some perspectives. But then it's also beneficial to that person that owns 20, 30, 40 properties to have that insight on the business plan. So different use cases for having somebody like me on retainer.
No, that's very cool. Very cool. I don't know if I've ever heard that either. That's really good to know.
It was a client of mine that came up with it and pitched it to me, and I was like, this is interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Let's run with this. And it's been 6 months now, and we've kind of optimized it, and I've picked up a couple more clients that love the idea as well. And it's just bringing a whole bunch of value to their team, because a lot of times I'm spending time with their property manager, with their acquisitions manager, with maybe the person that's out there raising equity for the team, for the fund, spending time with them, and kind of making sure that everybody on the team is up to speed on how my job works, which helps them to be better at their job. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. It's awesome, man. Well, this has been a ton of information. I'm sure people have gotten a ton out of it, and we'll get to it, but I'm sure people will reach out to you.
The world is, like I said at the beginning, it's like drinking out of a fire hose every day. Things are ever changing, and that's the value that I hope to bring to anybody that wants to work with a loan broker. And it's not just a loan broker. I mean, more of a capital markets consultant and business consultant, if you will. But that's the value that I've found that brings the most value.
Yep. Yeah, you're a solution provider with financing, and most lenders, banks, you're not going to get that. So
we're launching this week. We are launching a self-storage finance training program.
Nice.
First guys in, it'll be less than $100. This is going to teach you how to think about the capital markets. I've got a whole matrix on different types of loan products and how you can plug that into your underwriting. You snag our underwriting models. I teach people how to go to lenders directly. Ideally, somebody that buys this program doesn't have to use me. They've got enough information. They've got my templates. They've got my presentation templates. They've got my underwriting templates. They've got how to go about having a conversation with the lenders, how to position themselves in the marketplace to get partners. Kind of the soup and the nuts of what I do. I'm kind of handing over those keys to the person that wants to get started themselves and do it themselves and learn all this kind of stuff and get their portfolio started. Or maybe it's somebody that's like trying to scale their portfolio and they need better presentation with lenders and that kind of stuff. So we're launching that hopefully by Friday.
That's awesome.
It'll be
this is going to air after that. So do you have anything coming up maybe like a month or so?
Yes.
Or where can people reach out? And I do want to ask you another question, but where can people reach out and find me?
And by the time this airs, they'll be able to go to this link and it'll pop up, but it's Storage Vault, storage-vault.co.
.co.
It'll take right to it.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes too. And I'll still get you other. I want to ask you, I know you're a golfer. You crushed us when we were in Dallas. What was that, about a year and a half ago? You golfing? How's the golf game look?
I am still a heavy golf addict, as I have been my entire life. Golf's good. A couple of years ago, I bought a house in a country club neighborhood, joined the country club. So I kind of just stay in my little bubble out here, work from the house, and play golf with the guys.
Awesome.
So
it's awesome, man.
Golf is my game, and it's my wife. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that she hates how much I golf, but she allows me to do it.
That's good. Hey, we all need that release. We all need that.
That's right. How's your
what's that?
How's your golf game since we played?
Dude, I've finally got instructions. I won't go into all of it, but I've finally got instructions. Went to 2 of them. Everything's changed. Like, I might as well be swinging left-handed. Everything's changed. It's gotten a ton better. Played out in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago and was shockingly surprised at how well I struck the ball, but it's still a work in progress. It's always a work in progress, right? But
oh yeah. But the better you get, the more frustrating it gets too.
Yeah, because you're used to hitting those good shots, and when you hit a bad shot, you're like, what just happened?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's
That's
a
awesome, man.
constant battle. I played high school, college, played on the Adams tour for a year. And when, I was turning in scores of 2 or 3, 4, 5 under in 2 days and strutting in there to turn my scorecard, I'm like, heck yeah. And the winner's at like minus 16 under. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
That's a
What
tough
tour did you? We should have started here. I apologize. What tour were you on?
Adams Tour. It's a really low level pro tour. You qualify for the individual tournaments and then you go and you still have to pay the entry fees. You got to pay your own travel. It's not like you're sponsored. That's way up the chain. You would think that if you go and play on Adams, so you start getting picked up and get free golf balls, at least for free gloves or something. Not the case. I learned, and it's a very competitive game. So there's kids out there now that I got rocked. I gotta tell you this. So I got rocked by a 12-year-old. I am not kidding. We show up on the first tee. I'm playing with a buddy of mine at his country club. And his dad and son show up on the tee and they're like, hey, I think we'll pair with you guys today. Y'all want to play for money?
Oh, man.
Y'all want to get a game going? And I'm looking at his dad and the 12-year-old. I'm like, yeah, sure. How many strokes do y'all want?
Yeah.
And dad goes, none. And I'm like, something's fishy here. Like, all right, we'll take it. We'll take that action. The kid beat me by 5 strokes straight up.
Jeez.
I shot 75. He shot 2 under.
Jeez.
From one tee up for me. From one tee up.
Oh, one tee up. Okay. Still, he's 12.
I got rocked. I got completely rocked. I went home with my tail between my legs. It's like, I'm not even good at this game.
That's crazy, man. Well, it's
come to find out.
Tough game.
Come to find out that 12-year-old was top 20 in the nation.
Yeah.
And I still follow him today. I cheer him on at tournaments. It is incredible to watch this kid grow.
Yeah.
So such a cool game, but yeah, tough.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, we've got a what's that?
So got my butt kicked by a 12-year-old.
Yeah. There's the place I went to get my first lessons. It's an indoor place here in Columbus, and the instructor, he was more like a salesman because he tried selling me his monthly package that was like $2,500 a month. I'm like, listen, dude, I just need a few things. They try to get off the tee, and I'm not trying to go pro here, but he was really good. But his daughter is, I think he said 15, and she's on, like, all she does is travel. She kind of goes to school, but that week she was, I think, in Europe with the national team, and crazy golfer.
That's the next Nelly Corda right there.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's crazy. And I looked her up, and yeah, it's crazy to see these young kids doing that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I do want to ask you before we go, and again, I apologize. I should have started here, but I want to learn, and share more about lending. A lot of our guests, it seems like a lot of our guests are high level at something at some point in their life, and then it comes into business in one way or another. A lot of times it is sports. So obviously that was you. You were pro for a year. What happened? How was that transition from saying, you know what, I'm done being pro and going into the business world?
So I was still in school. So my story is I went to University of North Texas, played there for a year, didn't go to school, didn't really go to class, lost scholarship. Took a couple years off of school. By the time I went to Texas Tech, my D1 eligibility was almost gone. So I couldn't walk onto the team. And so instead of that, I tried to go play pro, and I just went to this qualifier and I qualified. So then I just kept going on the Adams tour for that year. But the time when I said it's time to stop was after you're spending $700 per entry tournament, per entry fee, plus the travel down to Houston from Texas Tech and Lubbock. It was either Houston, Oklahoma City, or Louisiana. You're paying for the travel, you're paying for the stay, you're paying for all your equipment. Yep. Any adjustments I needed in the equipment, I had to pay for that. And you would adjust based on the weather. If I needed a different ball flight for a particular weather scenario, down in Houston, it's way more, Lubbock is really dry. Houston is really humid. So the ball flies a little bit different. and maybe I need a lie angle change or something. You know, you got to pay for all that kind of stuff. So it was probably $1,300-1,400 a weekend that I tried to upkeep for a year. And when you're, you know, turning in 5-6 under in 2 days and winners at 15 under, and there's 15 people between you and them, you're not getting paid. No. Only really like the top 10 are getting paid up to like maybe $3,000. You know, it's a small tournament. There's not a whole ton of money to be made. So you got to play well, and you got to, in order to keep going, it's a very expensive sport. I mean, Hunter Mahan, who was on the tour for a while, he was in debt to his dad, $500,000 before he made it on the PGA to be able to pay him back. It's a very expensive sport. I mean, even just Q School to get to the Nationwide or Corn Ferry or web.com or even the PGA. I mean, it's very expensive. I think it's like you got 3 rounds of Q School. Each round you got to pay for the books and your rounds and your all that kind of stuff. It's probably like 10-15 grand per round. You got 3 of those to make it through, and you got to play perfect. It is a very difficult game. But yes, I think what you were leading into there was how that kind of translated over to business.
Yep.
Right. And I think, you know, I started a business before I got into this business, which was a marketing business. Mm-hmm. And I built that up and had a team of 15 people. And we had a couple CRM products that we built as well. I ended up packaging the whole thing up and selling it. And that's, you know, I used kind of that money to get into commercial real estate, kind of to learn this game. So a lot of, you know, the drive, the commitment, the mindset that you got to have to play competitive sports and stay in the game is the mindset that you need to be successful in business. So I think it translates very well. You know, if you ran a team with a business, maybe you didn't even own the business, but you ran a team of 30 people successfully and grew the revenue, and, you know, for your specific lane, that's going to translate over to real estate. Competitive sports, the way that you kept your head in the game, the way that you kept your head down and kept working and focused and optimized, whatever it is you were. I mean, from football players, baseball players, to golfers, to, I think the benefit about golf is you get to keep playing it for the rest of your life. Yep. In commercial real estate, a lot of people are golfers, so it's translated really well for me.
Yep.
But I get a lot of clients from the golf course, which is fantastic. But
yeah,
I think all of that translates very, very well over to commercial real estate. You got to keep the, you know, like this morning, I still have my morning routine that I had when I was playing competitive sports, because I still want to be optimized to, you know, to operate at a certain level all day.
Yep.
So it's very symbiotic.
Yeah, no, and it's really good to hear all that, and that's awesome stuff. And it's funny because it kind of dawned on me a little bit just hearing you say all that. And I played a little bit of college basketball, but a lot of guys that we have on here that have played you know, high level sports at some point, there was a transition to where it was like, what's my identity? But it seems like yourself, the people that are able to go from that sport to maybe a business or being an entrepreneur and take that energy into that, they can transition a little bit better and probably faster. I had a 9-to-5 where I couldn't really take like everything with me, right? I could only control so much in my 9-to-5. As an entrepreneur, like I don't have that itch anymore. I do play basketball on Monday still, but I don't have that itch anymore. And that, like, I know who I am. You know, I lost that sense of identity when basketball is over. But now, maybe as an entrepreneur, the quicker you can turn into something, probably the better, and to get over that.
Right. No, I agree. I think I just lost my train of thought. I don't know if you could hear that or not. I got a contractor at my house, and they were just banging on my wall.
Yeah, you can hear it.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. We're about done anyway.
That's how we're ending this thing, is with contractors banging on my window.
There we go. Yeah, that's a good way to end it.
But no, I think you're absolutely right. I think what you carry over, you know, it is hard to carry all that kind of stuff over into a 9-to-5.
Yep.
I think what you learn in team setting, especially like you said, basketball or baseball,
Basketball.
I mean, you're probably constantly hyping up your teammates, right? And you're supporting each other and all those kind of things. And that's exactly the way you need to be in this business. Yep. This business is highly reliant on the partners that you have around you. Your mindset is highly dependent on the types of people that you have, that you surround yourself with. I think all of that carries over at a very high rate. The translation to that is almost exact, in my opinion.
Yep. No, it's awesome, man.
I think team events and even golf is where it's an individual event.
Yep.
The mindset's pretty similar. You got to keep hyping each other up. You got to stay positive. You got to keep going. Just because you lose the game, you lose the deal, doesn't mean there's not one right behind it that works out.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and it's probably the how to deal with failure. I mean, there's a ton of components, right, that goes into it, but how to deal with failure or losing and then moving on. I think that's a lost trait that, and I'm not saying you have to play sports to have that, but I think if you play sports, especially at a high level, you realize how to deal with that. And you can take that over to business. And one hurdle, because it is hard being an entrepreneur, right? You're not going to find one thing and it's going to work out initially, and you're just going to become multimillionaire right away. You're going to have hurdles. You're going to have walls you run into. And playing sports, you're used to those walls and you're used to those obstacles to where you're like, I don't care. I'll just overcome them. Yeah.
When you lose a game, you don't lose a bunch of money. When you lose a deal here, you can lose a bunch of money.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I think your mental fortitude, I mean, your North Star is that, are you letting go and letting God in some scenarios and letting it play out to his plan.
Yep.
And trying to stay faithful to that is probably the most difficult part when you're looking at losing 50 grand.
Yeah.
God, how is there a bigger plan than this? That's hard. You got to have the mental fortitude. You got to have that backbone that allows you to get back up and go again.
Yep.
But also having somebody like me on the team is going to make sure that you don't lose that 50 grand. So part of what we're here to do.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. Well, this has been awesome. Appreciate all the information and your story too. How can obviously we've got your storage.vault.co. How else can people get a hold of you?
Storage-vault.co.
Sorry, storage dash, and I got dashes.
No problem. Just want to make sure that was right. Best way to reach me is through email. CB is my initials, Cody Baker, CB at Baker-CP, as in capitalpartners.com.
Cool. Easy enough. Awesome, man. Well, again, appreciate having you on. Everybody reach out to Cody. Obviously, he's a huge help with your lending needs, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for following, subscribing, and listening to this episode of the Do More podcast hosted by John Farling. To learn more or ask questions, go to l4investing.com.